Good morning and welcome to Barb 1030, basic hairstyling and hair cutting. We are going to be going over the PowerPoint for Chapter 14, Men's Hair Cutting and Styling. And the reason that it's important for us to go over this PowerPoint is because, ultimately we want to be able to give you content that helps you to make sure that you get the objectives for this class. And on top of that, too, help you to enhance just your general understanding. So we're going to break this PowerPoint up into multiple segments, and the reason that we're doing that as well is because, number one, we can't have a video that's over 15 minutes long, first and foremost. But also, too, it's a lot of content. So the reality is that because there is a lot of content, we have to break up into different segments so that we can give you a little piece of the pie each time, and you're not overwhelmed. So we're going to try to keep each segment, between 10 to 15 minutes long, give or take. As we go over each slide, I'm going to add a little bit more color to it in terms of, I kind of like to describe it as the fact that when it comes to these PowerPoints, they're very black and white. They just give you facts, figures, numbers. They're very much so to the point. But in terms of being able to add a little more flavor to it, I'm going to talk a little bit more about specific topics that will help to enhance your knowledge of these different subjects that we're going to be talking about. To go along with that as well, I'm also going to be asking some questions that are taken directly from your quiz, or I should say directly from your final exam. So for your final exam for this class, it's a little over 90 questions. And that's because that final exam combines chapters 14 and 16. Chapter 14 has about 60 questions to it, give or take. But we're going to be going over some of those questions too to be able to help to enhance your knowledge in regards to that as well. All right, so let's get started. So as we talked about, we're talking about men's hair cutting and styling. This is part of chapter 3, not chapter 3. This is the beginning of part 3 in your book, because your book is broken up into different parts based on how challenging or how intense the curriculum is. So the learning objectives that are mentioned here talks about explaining the importance of the client consultation and different questions that they might have, envisioning exactly what your client wants. Now, why is that important? When it comes to the client consultation, this is really your start in terms of knowing exactly what it is that the client wants, being able to know exactly what it is that they need in terms of the style that they have, or the style that they want to have. So we're going to talk about the importance of the consultation, talking about the different anatomical features. When we talk about the word anatomy, how their face is structured, their profile, and also too in terms of identifying different sections of the head, which is no doubt very important in terms of what we do as being barbers. Excuse me. Identifying tapering and blending areas. This is important because when you think about the fact that your state board exam is based off of doing a tapered haircut, using guards in some sections and no guards in other sections. So being able to make sure that you can do a good, correct blend is of great importance, I should say. There's some other different points here, and I'm going to do my best to not necessarily just read through the PowerPoint, because I'm not here just to read a PowerPoint that you can read yourself. But there will be some specific points that I'll kind of highlight in particular. So we see some more objectives that are listed here as well, talking about different techniques, using the shears, the clippers, and razors. Also to identifying different types of styles, describing exactly what a finished haircut is. But we'll talk about being able to polish a haircut and what that really means. Because ultimately anybody can just cut some hair off. But what's going to make you a great barber as opposed to just being a good one is the fact that you're going to polish your work and really do that good finishing work. So we're going to discuss that as well. Some different basic styling techniques. Again, this is basic hairstyling. So this being a basic hairstyling class and a basic hairstyling PowerPoint, what this basically is referring to is the fact that you're learning a lot of intro techniques, but taking a little bit step further. In Barb 1022 and 1024, you're going over a lot of these different techniques to start, but this is giving you the next step before you get into advanced haircutting in your last set of classes. So we're going to be talking about that as well. So let's get started. We talked earlier on briefly about the client consultation. This is simply a conversation between you and your client. What I personally like to do is I like to turn the client to me so that I can literally see them. I can see their face. I can see their reaction to questions that I ask. And you have to ask certain questions. Being able to have a good consultation is very important because you get to know exactly what it is the client really wants, what their expectations are. So after you drape your client, you start your consultation with some basic questions. Now, what are some of those questions? What are some of those questions that you can think of? Why would you ask, for instance, what type of work do they do? Why would you ask questions in terms of how often would they like to care for their hair? How much maintenance work would they like to do? Well, those are good questions to bear in mind, because when you ask those sort of questions, it helps you to dictate what kind of style works best for them. For instance, if they do work where they may have to wear a hat all day, then maybe having something of a longer hairstyle might not be best for them, because it's going to get pretty hot under there eventually. So maybe a shorter hairstyle. Perhaps maybe when it comes to how much maintenance do they want to do, do they want to take time in their morning to get together their hairstyle, to be able to use products and so forth. That's important, because if they don't want to have to do any kind of maintenance, then maybe they should have a certain type of hairstyle for that. So that's why some of these different questions are important. It mentions the word here in the bottom of this page, envisioning. Envisioning is being able to visualize exactly what that hairstyle is before you even start it. So ultimately, once you ask these questions, you want to make sure that you have a clear vision in mind of what's what. 3 words that are very important: organize, clarify, repeat. You want to organize your thoughts, clarify what they want, and then repeat it one last time before you start the haircut. And that will never leave you. Organize, clarify, repeat. So we've moved on to our next slide. Facial shapes. Now, facial shapes are broken down to these different types. There's different types of facial shapes. There's pictures that are listed here for different ones. For instance, right here, we have the oval and the oval face shape, which is typically the ideal shape, because this helps to be able to determine what kind of style that it really works best for them. The oval face shape typically is ideal because they can generally use a lot of, or have styled a lot of different, how should I put it? You can use a lot of different styles on them, if that makes sense. Meaning that if they want to have a more low haircut, that can work. If they want to have more hair, that can work. If they want to have longer sideburns or shorter sideburns, their facial structure, which is based off of their facial bones and their anatomical features that we talked about earlier, that helps them to be able to have versatility of a lot of different styles. We also see here the round face shape, and then there's also some other ones that are listed here as well. Now, your job is going to be able to make sure that you look at these different types of facial shapes, and perhaps even as a little exercise, you go home tonight, look at your facial shape in the mirror. See which one best suits you. See what kind of style best suits you based on that facial shape. Look at some people in your family, your husband, your wife, your kids. What kind of facial shape do they have? So that's an exercise for you to be able to do, do your best in terms of determining what kind of facial shapes people have. We also have different profiles. Now again, we have listed here multiple ones: the straight profile, concave, convex, angular. Those are just some different profiles that are listed. With each one of these different profiles that are listed here, they have a specific way that they look, a specific way that their face is proportioned. So being able to dictate those profiles is of great importance as well when it comes to servicing your clients. As we move on, it talks about sideburn lengths. Now, when you talk about doing a men's hairstyle, it gives some basics right here. If you look at the second point that's listed, and I'm not sure if you can see my cursor or not, but I'm going to highlight it. No, I won't highlight it. I apologize. We'll probably start highlighting the next slide when I get a little more used to this. But when it comes to the sideburns, short, medium, or long, relative, again, to the client's features and their facial structure. So when it comes to dictating what kind of style, again, that they're getting, whether it's the haircut, sideburns, whatever it is, your ultimate goal is to be able to complement what their facial structure is. You want to make sure that you're maximizing all of their good features while minimizing some of the weaker ones, if that makes sense. Well, of course it makes sense. Maximize the great features, minimize some of the more weaker ones that they think that they have. Okay? So what are reference points? Now, at this point, we're talking about different sections of the head. Reference points mark points on the head where the surface of the head changes. All right. Now, again, we're not going to go through one by one when it comes to some of these different reference points and different parts in the head. But what's important about these is that this is where you separate yourself from being a professional to just being somebody who cuts hair. A professional will say that I'm going to start your blend on the right side parietal ridge area. Now the client doesn't know what that is. But remember, we were the first doctors. So we use these real terms to be able to distinguish one reference point on the head from another, to be able to distinguish or talk about how we're going to style their hair based on these specific terms. So understanding a lot of these points is of great importance for you. You're not just going to say, well, I'm just going to cut the hair at the top and cut some down the side. Now, when you're talking about the side, do you mean the temporal area? Do you actually mean the side of the head? Are you referring to the parietal ridge? Are you talking about the crest? Are you talking about in the back, the base of the skull where the occipital bone is? So that's why a lot of these terms are so very important. So when it comes to the sections of the head, we see here listed this diagram which talks about the apex, for instance. When you look right here in the middle of that head, right up top, right in the center, that's the apex. As an exercise, you could perhaps take a comb, all-purpose comb, for instance, and rest it on the top of your head. Where that comb rests right on the top of your head right there is where the apex is. That's the topmost portion of your head. And then from that point, you have these different four corners that are shown here, which basically help to segment the head and break it up into different segments. So again, you're seeing that we're starting to break down exactly what are some of these different terms. So we're going to start to close out part one of this PowerPoint. And to do that, I'm going to ask you a question that's going to be based again off of your final exam. And I'm going to see if you remember what the answer is. Okay? So, a person's blank is determined by the position and prominence of the facial bones. I'm going to ask it again, and I'm going to give you options. A person's blank is determined by the position and prominence of the facial bones. A, their hair texture. B, their vision. C, facial shape. Or D, beauty. I'm going to give you a second to get that answer and see what you think. And if I went through it too quickly, you can just take a glance back or just rewind it real quick and hear the question one more time. But the options again are A, texture, B, vision, C, facial shape, or D, beauty. And the answer is, of course, C, facial shape. That's what we've been talking about, right? That's what we predominantly have been talking about for today. So, as we said, this is part one, and we're going to move on to part two. And make sure that you refer to your Milady textbook if you have any other questions, or of course, come see me, and we can discuss it further.